Good morning. My name is Jamie Rich, and welcome to Rise and Shine Sundays. We're really delighted that you're here, not only because we're always delighted to have you here on Sunday mornings, but this particular Sunday, we're going to be focusing on something that we all can relate to. And that is, do you remember at one time that there wasn't something called online meetings? That at one time we actually, gathered in spaces, which we still do, but most of us have a time online and they now have experience online in terms of how we gather and how we communicate. And I don't know about you, but oftentimes I find a lot of these meetings are still running old programs about how meetings are supposed to look. Someone's in charge. You have to kind of sit there and show your presence in the rooms. And, sometimes people drone on, sort of like what I'm doing right now with this particular introduction. But what if we took the idea of gathering together? And what if we had the ability to say, wait a second, could we flip how we gather? And so that's what we're going to be taking a look at in this hour. Again, one of the things that we do here on Rise and Shine Sundays is none of us are experts. There's no one who's going to be able to say, well, I am the authority on how things should flip in meetings. But the collective wisdom of what you share and what our people in the room are going to be sharing today is where the collective wisdom comes from. So we invite you to, if you're watching us on the Breakthrough Show Network, let us know in the chat as we're going through things, and we'll bring those chats into the conversation. If you'd like to join us here in the room and be part of the broadcast, we're at rsslive.org. And boy, howdy, do we have a party going this morning. Welcome, everyone, to ta-da! This wonderful overview of humans who are assembled here to talk about gathering. Welcome, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And we will share more about ourselves because, I myself, as I just look at this overlay of people here, want to get to know everybody in the room. And I want to know who's in the chat watching us as well. But Ray normally I turn at this particular time on Rise and Shine Sundays, I turn to our good friend Sang to get us grounded on definition. But Sang, with all due apologies, I'd like to be able to toss that baton to Ray this morning and say, Ray, what the hell are we doing here?
Of course, because I also want to know what the hell we're doing here.
Why did you call us all here on a Sunday morning?
First, I want to say huge shoes to fill. Sang is such a wonderful person that introduces topics from lived experience, as well as this wonderful stories that she brings to our discussions, which just ripple through the whole space and the conversational flow. I just wanted to throw one thing out is when Jamie and I were looking at creating the week as well as what to do on this Sunday, the idea of flipping gatherings was inspired from two things. Is flipping the classroom, where educators at some point a few years back said, we're tired of the teacher at the front of the room dictating how education is going to happen. Flipping the classroom meant there was going to be the students driving the process of what the topic or what the course programming was going to be. So flipping the classroom, thank you to educators, as well as an inspired person, author called Priya Parker, who said, the art of gathering. We need to change the way we gather. And this will be short. So she first said, change the invitation to change the behavior. Then change the environment to change the behavior. So Jamie touched on one element is the modeling structure, or how we have meetings or communication, has been largely influenced by business structures, presentations. I come from that world. For 30 plus years, I worked in visual communications, structuring presentations, and I got tired of it. And there's got to be a better way. And so this is where the technology needs to catch up to what we humans want to have happen when we gather. So I'm going to toss it to you folks to say, here's what I've learned. Conversations are valuable. but we don't treat them like they're valuable. How can we change that? How can we shift?
Well, thank you, Ray. That is probably the most cogent introduction that we have had here in the history of Rise and Shine Sundays. So let's talk a little bit about that uncomfortableness that people feel sometimes in these rooms. Is there somebody who'd like to welcome Regine, or we didn't get a chance to see you earlier in the pre-show? We're glad you're here. Those of you who have been meeting, what do you find is something that needs to flip from based on your own experiences? Saying, I see you nodding a little bit. Is there something, that discomfort that you've seen or felt? What's your felt experience when you come into some of these online gatherings?
I feel like I know that it's like entering a room in person, right? I have to feel it out, see who's here. Do I know anybody here? Do I recognize anybody's name? What does the energy of the room? Is there music playing? What does it? Are there flowers? Are the flowers on the table real or fake? Like, I'm looking at different types of energy type details like that, environmental details for sure. So then, even in the same sense, because when you come into an online space, even though you're in the comfort of your own home, there's still that. Do I want to be on camera? Do I not want to be on camera? Are they going to talk about my background? Are they not going to talk? There's still these other elements that come into play that may be a little bit different. So I think it brings up a different set of like anxieties maybe about, when you come in online too. So
yeah.
It's an interesting balance for sure.
Well, I think one of the things that always drives me nuts is that if somebody invites me to a gathering and then all of a sudden they say, well, I want to be able to share this information with you. But wait a second, you're using the word sharing, and really all you're doing is talking to me rather than with me. Marjan, I see you smiling. Is there something that does that remind you of an experience you've had?
Well, yeah, to be honest, a lot of times, what makes me insecure sometimes about sitting in a room like this is we talk about equality of people and stuff, but basically sometimes you're all over the world and with totally different expectations. And what we don't know from the beginning sometimes is what are these expectations about treating each other as an equal, and because that's not always the same thing in the different cultures or places where we are. So that's one thing. Also, like, who is used to do this kind of circle, conversations, campfire, so we say. I asked Ray to switch off the campfire because I find it rather funny in 36 degrees heat wave time. It was too difficult to change the picture. But anyway,
blue or something, right?
So that is the thing. Like, makes me a bit insecure in the beginning. Also, like, if there's no subject or if there's something we are going to share, like, how much can you share or how much can you talk? It's a bit eerie to find where am I and how long can I say something?
Yeah.
Or who's still listening? That you can't feel the room, like.
Right. So the importance of safety in spaces like this, not only from the way in which the geometry is set up, right? We feel very safe in the classroom knowing that there's some guy or dude or whatever, some sage on the stage up there talking, and we can kind of stay in the background somewhere. So even though we don't feel part of the conversation, we're comfortable in the inadequacy of it sometimes, because we also don't know if we get into one of these sessions, well, wait, one of the examples I always used to bring out is if we're in a corporate meeting, right, and we're all talking about how our week is going, and we were talking with somebody and we say, well, John, how you doing on that project? And John says, well, it's been a really rough week for me. I wasn't really able to do all this. In fact, I'm not even sure if I can meet that goal or whatever. If John admits that, he is going to be ostracized by the group and isolated and pushed aside. Claudia, please speak more about what's on your mind.
Thank you, Jamie. And I would have my camera on, except my camera doesn't work. But Jaloki and Sandra and I have been meeting with some other people in a group, I would say, for 14 years now online. And when we first started meeting, one of the things that we did before every meeting was we would ground ourselves into the circle. And we did that by just a short meditation where we brought the energy into the middle of the circle and focused on that energy, and that energy was comprised of all the energies of everyone there. And so that was the beginning. And now, of course, now we just jump right in, because as soon as we come into the circle together, we are in that energy.
Right.
And so every once in a while, if something is going on heavy with someone, we will ground. But now it's not a necessary, I don't think, but maybe they have a different opinion. I don't think it's a necessary thing at this point for our particular circle.
Because that
But I
grounding.
think,
Go ahead.
but I think with new people, that grounding brings them into the middle of the circle with everyone else,
Gotcha.
and it creates that level of equality, at least in my opinion.
No, I think
Right. And Jamie, I feel, and you did the same thing with Marianne coming in when she did, because you had to give her the expectations of the room, right? So it's the
Right.
same kind of thing that we did beforehand. And it's the same thing when you go into those spaces. And I think the leader who is inviting you into the space, it, then becomes somewhat creative in that space to make it comfortable and safe enough for everyone to be in that space.
Right. So even from the get-go, we've already talked about flipping the whole idea of meetings to the idea that in order for it to happen in this way, we need to have that safety done in some grounding sort of way. Sandra, I saw you nodding when Claudia was talking. What are some of those other foundational things that can change the way in which we gather to make it more impactful?
Thank you, and hello to everyone. And thank you, Claudia. So good to see you here. Everything that Claudia said, and remembering that we all do come with our own whatevers, and it's not scripted. The space that we're choosing to be in is not a dogma space. It's not a scripted space. It's a space of heart. And that takes time. I think that's the other thing that we have to remember, that it doesn't happen overnight. What Claudia described with our sacred circle, it happened over time. And in the space of trying everything, it was pure experimental. And it just simply organically grew into where we are now. Now, we're not a quote unquote closed circle from the standpoint that we don't ever want anybody else to come in. And yet at the same time, we've invited other people in at various points in time, and they have choice. We're all at choice as to whether we can or cannot, or when and when not. And it's really okay. Leveling up the playing field is the most important thing. Helping everyone to understand that there is no expert, as you did, Jamie, coming in. There's no one person who has all the information. And yet from my lived experience, I am the only expert from my lived experience on any one thing that very well may parallel with others in the room. It's still only mine. So just really allowing people to feel the safety, to feel seen and to feel heard, and to know that they can even be in the space and be silent, because silent is so important and powerful and power-filled. And we don't have to fill the room with words, and we don't have to always fill the fill the room with lots of joy and excitement, because sometimes you have to fill that room with what's really coming forth, which is the sadness, which is the the world sucks, and today I do too. All of that is what helps us to maintain our human dignity and our human connection.
Right. It's so interesting that you said that, because the tendency then in modernity is to pump up that energy. Like when we're getting together for a meeting, like there's that rah moment, just like, so you allow, Sandra, people to arrive as who they are. But there's those people who, like, I'm sure we've all been to those conferences where it's like, okay, folks, we got to get your energy revved up. And there's sometimes that I want to throw the finger really to those people. It's just like, you know what? Leave me the fuck alone. Really? Just the fact, I'm sorry, it's YouTube, folks, so we can swear here. It's all okay. But I wrote down, just as you were talking, the idea that the permission to experiment that you were talking about, Sandra, that is there, right? As opposed to when most groups gather, we have to produce something, gosh darn it. If we're going to be here and we're going to gather, there's no experimentation. We have to produce something, And then secondly, you said, go slow. Oh my God, we can't go slow. We have to get quick results. Because if we're not going to get quick results, why are we here? And perhaps if I'm not getting those results, could I pump you up more to get you to go faster? Jaloki, is this true? I mean, you've been, corralling all these folks in gatherings for a while. Is that what's true for you?
Right.
You asked me loaded question for me to determine if something is true or not.
Yeah.
I'll kind of how do you say avoid answering that question, but I can enter from a tangent as often do. This is very rich already conversation. One first thing I would like to do is to expand a little bit the context on what the hell we're doing here.
Right.
And so we're saying that we need a new way to enter in conversation and to shift the narrative. Also, I think we agree that the reference way that we want to shift from is the corporate modern, I would add Western. But the corporate modern Western has been organizing meeting for a very little time, for a few decades or hundreds of years. Humans have been meeting for many longer time than that. And so the shifting and the new may not be completely 100% new, and we may want to get inspiration from other ways of meeting that existed before this corporate modern Western way, and some of them still exist right now. And as many people here have already mentioned, the way we gather, the way we show up, the way I'm coming into a meeting is determined by my paradigms, my worldviews. And I'm gonna add, my worldview is also influenced, colored by my self-view. And so the way, for example, I'm going a little deeper here. The degree to which I am aware of my ego and the wounds of my ego will determine how much performative I'm going to try to be here. If I have a self-view that is comfortable enough that I know I'm not perfect in whatever I define perfection, but that is my perfect way to be, then I can be authentic. I can say what's on my heart, what's in my mind, without being scared of how people are going to judge me. I can stay in silence. I can wait for inspiration from other worlds to bring here. I can listen beyond the words, beyond the expression, beyond the tone of someone and see where it connects with me positively, negatively, in a way that I can offer something, or in a way that tells me, oh, there's something to heal here. And all of these, I think, are, Sandra said, it takes time. It takes time because it's connected to my healing process.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, no. You're fine, because one of the things that I love about what you're saying, because those of you who are here for the first time, I tend to take notes on. I actually write things down that people are saying, because it helps me remember them, right? And one of the things that you're talking about is drawing from these ancient, I'll call them ancient practices, right? Of looking at not only the conversation that's being held, but how does this impact me while it's happening on all these other different levels, as opposed to listening to what a corporate efficiency expert may have taught us about meetings that said, if you allow everybody to go around and introduce themselves in the beginning, that's an effective way of, I don't know, seems to me like an effective way of wasting time and forcing people to come up with elevator speeches about themselves, which may or may not be accurate representatives of to what Sandra says of who I am today, right? And so, you're inviting people to, again, Jaloki, look at themselves as complex beings, not just, convenient role models to say, well, okay, Claudia, you're our brains expert in the room. Speak from that. Regine, is there anything that pops out to you in this conversation that we're having this morning that you'd like to share?
Yes, actually, first of all, I want to say hi to everyone. Hello. Being a first-time participant with you all, so happy to be with you. I am coming to this with a big question mark in my mind. I'm not so sure I completely get it, but the title really resonated with me, flipping how we gather, and I was wondering what this might entail, because there's any number of ways that one can start looking at it. And as I'm listening to each of you and what you have shared, the thing that's coming up for me is this idea of intent. I think that the intent behind a gathering definitely goes a long way in terms of defining how we show up within that particular gathering. The corporate meeting is definitely very different from what we're doing here. If I come to a course, for example, where there is something, I come with the student mindset, I show up in a different way. So the intent behind the gathering, but also the intent we have for ourselves. And by that, I mean, we also take responsibility for how we show up within any given space. Of course, there's appropriate ways of behaving in different number of contexts, but for me, the part of what's my choice within this? What's my responsibility? Do I have to do things the way everybody does because that's the way it is? Or do I have to work with my own judgment and give myself permission? So I'm still living with that question, but I always personally tend to lean on the side of what's my part in this? Do I need to wait for someone else to tell me how to behave, how to show up? But regardless of the space, I need to show up in a way that allows me to show up in a way that's authentic. And to me, that's always something that comes back to us ultimately. Of course, it's not black and white, but you get my point. Ultimately, you are who you are. It's up to you to show up in a way that does justice to that. So this is what's coming up for now.
Yeah. No, that's so beautifully put. Because you brought up a wonderful word, which I love these words, which is the intent. We talked about, what is the meeting's purpose, right? There's a purpose to a particular gathering, but then what is our intent in showing up, right? My bias is that we're living right now in a world where people are drowning in content, where opinion and points of view dominate and what has been talked about, where listening, perspective, how do I choose to show up? What is my conscious role? What do I want to participate in? And Ali, I know you've heard me say this before many times, and I know that there were some things that Regine said that you responded to, but Ali, you're in a lot of different environments, both as a linguist and as a person who's just been participating in these online spaces. When you think about that intent and when you think about what's been shared, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, first I would like to thank again Jamie and Ray and acknowledge the amazing presence of Hope, of Jeloki, of Claudia and Sang and Sandra and Marianne. And also, Regine, thank you so much for your share. I really resonate, and everyone who is listening and watching. You are also welcome to comment, and because your voice is mattering. So we are all here, at least 10 gather pillars. I love to play with words, and it's evolving. It's like from gather pillars to butterflies. And for me to realize I've been in online space more than 31 years, since 95. I've been witnessing communities growing and declining, and I'm tired of the one too many, like the TV show where I'm watching TV and I cannot reply. At some point, I'm really happy to give the space to others. But if there is a presenter with his or her agenda, it's not what I feel like a gathering. A gathering, etymologically, it's gatherian, which means to bring together, to collect. And it means to really bring all the voices together. So there shouldn't be any agenda. And for me, it's about intention. Why do I go there? Because we were talking also about some point about decision. I'm here right now, only in a country like in the same country as Marianne, and I'm deciding to be with you, and also to acknowledge that we are 10. So it's about dividing the time. I'm not going to speak more than 2 or 3 minutes, but I'm really happy because I can hear all the voices that what matter for me. Thank you.
No, again, thank you, Ali. You used again that wonderful word that I try to consciously choose, which is gathering. Because if you dare to call what you're doing a gathering, you have to be willing to let it be a gathering, right? And I was listening to an older edition of Rise and Shine Sundays where I used to go around and have people introduce themselves, and I thought, wait a second, people introduce themselves by who they are in the room when they choose to speak about what's happening. And it's an invitation. If you'd like to get to know more about someone, you have permission to inquire, right? You can go slow, you can develop relationships. But, it's funny how all of these artifice conventions come from that. I'll use a term called one to many, and Ray, and I also hope if there's some things that you would like to offer us, because we always want to have hope in all of our discussions, right? Was there something that's been said that's particularly stands out to you?
I think she's got some noise in the background. She put in chat.
She's got some audio issues? Okay.
Yeah.
So would you be willing to fill in that gap, Ray? Because now that since you began us and you've been listening, I didn't mean, you didn't birth us. I didn't mean to make it sound that way. But since you started us off, where have you seen that we're heading with this? Because we really talked about some foundational concepts to how that flip happens, rather than if you will, a corporate way of saying, well, this is the fix. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've decided how we're going to fix meetings. We're going to flip it, and this is exactly what it's going to look like.
Yeah, and I think it was Claudia that brought us together with what's the soup in a previous conversation. What's really resonating with me is all the different elements that everyone has introduced into the conversation. Ollie with the idea of we're coming together means, and Regine, when you shared with us the idea of the individual connecting in to a group, to the collective, what is the dynamic? What is the space? What is the intent that we're trying to share? What are the needs of the individual as they are in relation to the needs of the group? So we all have to determine what that means and what's actually happening. So the shift, and Yoloki touched so beautifully on the fact that it's what we've forgotten, not what we're creating from nothing. we're not creating from nothing the art of gathering. We're actually remembering what we've forgotten or what we've put aside, because the Western culture for only this 150-year period has basically said that here's the one thing that we need to follow, as opposed to what is the wisdom of the group, and how is that shared, and how are all the voices brought together. That's the magic of all the outside the Western world. The emphasis has always been on the collective, the group coming in to share the lived experience. So if we weave together all these things that we've shared, we're starting to look at, okay, what is the communication process and things that we need to take care of. Is like at the very start, and I'll sort of end on that note, is I had the privilege of being part of some group discussions with Marianne and a group called the Fido Network. And what they introduced was the starting point for a specific group session, as well as a book circle, was the grounding exercise, because we're coming from a world of tumultuous noise, and everyone shows up literally out of breath because they've either come from a meeting or are thinking of the next meeting. So the grounding brought us together for that shared energy and the space, the quiet, and the slowness that we were about to embark on. And what was interesting, which is part of the learning and experimenting process, this group then said, okay, for the book circle, we had a host, and then the hosting was passed on to whoever else was in the room that was given a choice to participate or not. So then all of a sudden, the voices were now being included. There was no one in charge. We were all in charge.
Right.
Or we all have the responsibility of, like Regine, I think you were saying, the accountability of what is my accountability? What is my space? What is my stance or thing that I want to be? And I think that's all we've shared with in there, is that has to be taken in consideration within the models and the processes that we follow. So we're shifting possibly backward and forward at the same time.
Well, and I also think it's really important that Marja, did you want to offer in on something? Well, because I'll come back to that. I think it's really important, though. I loved everything that you said just in terms of this, but I also want to, this is my encouraging energy. This is my cheerleader energy wanting to come out, which says, I want to be able to encourage people to do this more frequently. Right, to create opportunities for gathering, to sort of, if you will, you remember when you used that phrase, Ray, where we shape the tools and the tools shape us. I think it's important that we take this tool and shape it to do some of the things that Jaloki and Sandra and Marjan and everyone has been talking about, because otherwise the tools will continue to shape us in ways that they're designed to make it go to the control structure, the one-to-many things. And so, I mean, I'm going to toss a free ball in the air here right now, because I don't know if this is just an old man, waving at clouds saying, I want the world to be different right now. But I don't think we have done a good enough job of taking these tools to use them to create gathering experiences for the magic and the wonder that they can create. Anyone, feel free to chime in.
Yeah. It depends who we is. Just a little anecdote. I'm Haitian, and about other things, Haitians, when we're between, together between us, and we're safe, we talk a lot. And Regine is laughing. And actually, I want to bring back the intent that Regine brought. We talk with the intent of talking. The talking is the point. It's not, what are we? What's the goal? What's the objective? What are we realizing here? What where do we just talk to talk? And well, when I say talk to talk, bear with me, just a minute. For example, and when I was still in IT, I used to do cultural orientation for foreigners, including Europeans and North Americans. And so I would translate things that Haitians would say. And for example, there's someone who's sitting on their porch and someone who's passing by. And so the person who's passing by say, "Hello, neighbor, you're sitting on your porch." And the neighbor who's sitting on the porch say, "Hello, neighbor, you're passing by." And so, and the Americans say, "Well, duh, what's the conversation about?" And then I try to explain to them, it's not about the words. It's about the connection.
Mhm.
It's about the heart. It's about the spirit. It's about all the ancestors who've done the same thing, and we're connected to them, and all the people who are not born yet and who are going to do the same thing, and we're connected to them here and now. And you know what? That's why I say it depends who we is. When I went to the US, I lived for a few years in the US, and one thing about in the US, and maybe in the North, the culture, which is male dominated, say that about women. That women talk a lot, and they talk with no they don't understand what's happening. When women talk, there's a lot of things that are happening beyond the words. So it's just, I'm saying that it's actually happening. Some groups are doing it, but they're not dominant groups.
Mm-hmm.
Dive in.
Regine is saying something, but I think you muted her.
Yeah, I'm asking. Interesting question. Are we allowed to just step in? Because
Yes.
something Jalaki said really struck me. I'm also Haitian, so that's why I was laughing. I would add my 2 cents along with what you shared, Ja. There's also, for me, that other layer of recognizing and acknowledging that another human being has entered the space and giving ourselves permission to interact and acknowledge that recognition. And this can be very extreme. Like one of the things that I know, I would venture to say 99.9% of Haitians living here experience is being extremely shocked that your neighbor walks by and you say hi and they don't answer. And some people take it really like a big insult. But when you remove all the layering, the dressing, it's really about acknowledging there's another human being here, another presence, and recognize it. I feel safe interacting, connecting to that presence.
Yeah, it's amazing how impersonal our personal meetings have become. Marjan.
Yes, I recognize this resonates with me a lot. The things you're saying, Jaluk and Regine, and Ray might recognize my answer here. We were talking about modernity before in that book circle group, and it was always my my red thread. Let's say the thing I come back to is how can we understand each other if we are from different backgrounds? Even me and Ollie, we're from very different backgrounds. I guess you're from the South, hearing your accent, so I know you're talking different language than me. And we think things about each other here as Wallons and Flemish people, or Brussels, I don't know. But the thing is, are we ready? If we, as a Western, North European people with our own stereotypes and reference frame, are we ready to listen and to recognize that what we don't know about other people, and can we open ourselves up, even if it's short? What Jalok and Regina are telling us here is the importance. This is one of the things, like in the city of Antwerp here or Ghent, one of the things that always play in between people is habits and the way people behave. And there's always something behind it. And we interpret it in the wrong way because we interpret things with our own reference frame. And there it starts, the friction starts. So I think if you want to open up a discussion worldwide, online and whatever, and you want to find common ground, this is something we need to take time for in the beginning, I guess, is who is who. And if there's something not well understood, like you're not making sense to me, for example. Okay, if something doesn't make sense, can we maybe make time and openness to just explain it in a short way and expect another human has another intent than you? Can you see? Can you live with that difference without judging? Of course, there's a whole other story around it, but it has to do with our whole split idea that comes from modernity, I guess.
It does. It does. There's so and let's have this Belgian talk continue. Ollie, what have you got?
Well, it's really special because Belgium is special compared to US or to Canada, but it's about to make efforts also to be in other space, like in Spanigodun, to be able to speak the other's language, and that's the most important. But what I would like also to say is to realize that the common ground is first to what we call the weather time. When we are meeting, how are you feeling? Is your sky a sunshine, or is your sky a lot of gray or thunder or whatever? Because we are of different backgrounds, but we are also of different moods. So if I tell upfront that I'm not feeling really well, that I'm here to do my best, but I'm not feeling good, then you will probably be quote unquote sweeter with me, knowing where I come from.
Right.
So to realize also the intention of gathering, what is the intention, but also to acknowledge that the silence and the presence is already a good point, because I could say, okay, no, I'm not going to gather with you today, and I did. So is to realize that to acknowledge the different energies of the different people in the room.
Right. But we also have to admit that modernity also co-opted the term, common ground. Because common ground, something Jaloki was talking about weeks ago, meant that we should all think alike about what we're doing. So, pluralism in diversity, there's this idea that it becomes a uniformity, right? And, and again, I'm going to blame, because why don't we because there's so much you can look at the US right now and blame us for. But we have invented this thing called homogenization, where we take what is uniquely individual within people, their different perspectives, and we prefer to then say, well, yeah, that's just all part of this blend, right? I think common ground, when you really look at when you're creating spaces for people to overlap and find common ground, again, there's a word that is missed. It you can't have instant common ground, right? Because it has to be found and explored by representing that beyond the common ground, Jaloki is Jaloki, Sandra is Sandra, Sang is Sang. There is this part of pluralism, but again, modernity has been able to say, you know what, we're all the same. And I've decided what that sameness is going to be for you. The sameness is going to look like this. Sang, I know you and I have talked about this sometimes too. We haven't heard from you in a while. It always makes my heart sad when I haven't heard from Sang in a while.
Well, it's very going back to a lot of things we've talked about, and in that connection is curiosity.
Yeah.
When you step in with curiosity, it's different than if someone goes, well, why are you doing that? Why do you do it that way? Because why create such a defensive tone, and the word itself is like some people, as if someone who's been judged my entire life about so many things, when someone automatically asks why, I automatically flinch and get defensive. But if someone leads in with curiosity, and even if this is what's interesting too, because as I have conversations with people, I can tell people, hey, this is how I would like to be approached about a specific topic or something like that, because my nervous system is this. And you would think that if you tell someone that, it resonates, but it does not always do that, right? And so, but creating an even deeper connection from that space, because now you've trusted someone to say, this is how I feel, this is my vulnerable moment, I'm trusting you with what you do with this. And then, of course, I know we've talked a lot about reaction. It's then, if they don't come into that space and hold that space for us, how do we react? Or is there not responding the answer that you need for yourself? there's a lot of work internally and externally all around, I feel like.
Yeah. I have there, my card is full of so many words right now. I can't even, we have to stop because I don't want to put more words. But, we
Right.
talked about that initial concepts of, of safety, right? And
Mhm.
I think it's okay to let trust slowly build. I think you
Yeah.
can set the tone for all of these things, but you cannot force trust, right?
Right.
You can set the framework for it to take place. You can make sure that people are seen, heard, and appreciated. But it's like, it's again bad parenting to think that trust, something as precious as trust, Claudia and Jaloki and Sandra, you've been meeting for what, 14 years, you said, that's a real demonstration of trust, right? Sandra, I see you nodding again. Are there some things that when I use the word safety and trust, people always think that they should instantly trust you, so modernity does a lot of things to convince, well, here, you can trust me. I have this very long web page that talks about all the things, the way in which people can recommend my product and my service, length, size, all of that. You've got to trust me, right?
Yes, Jamie, I trust you.
For now.
Here's the thing. And Ray, you're right. For now, it is about
right.
For now. It's in this moment. I trust you. What modernity? What we've been conditioned to. Sorry, I'm having a shakedown in my head. What we have been conditioned to is to create these giant balls of of expectation.
Mm.
And because of these balls of expectation, it's an emotional attachment that is driven by this expectation is going to fill my need, even though I don't even know what my need is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know I have a hole. I don't even know there's something here that I need to work on, but this expectation is going to take care of it. And when it doesn't,
mm-hmm.
then there's this other side of expectation of disappointment. Now, I set myself up for that. Society has conditioned us to that. And so here we are in these big cycles of constantly in this space of expectation. When we get into these rooms that we would like to be conversational, what I have learned over time is simply being as vulnerable and transparent as I can possibly be, because in that moment, I become the model for whatever it is that I'm saying or the group says, might not be able to get there yet, but that the group says they want.
Mm-hmm.
And when I choose responsibly and accountability to all that I'm sharing with, I am the model. I'm not the end, but I am in that moment the model.
Right.
So how do I want to model? Last thing I'm going to say is this. Sorry, I get excited. The common ground, the common thing, the common space among us all, it doesn't matter how we look at or perceive each other. If I slit my wrist, it's gonna bleed red. And if somebody on the other side of the world splits their wrist, it's gonna bleed red. And we keep bypassing the fact that we are all the same, have beautiful, unique differences, which is what gives us the gifts to be able to have these kind of conversations. It's the humanity. It's being human, being willing to have the open conversation that we are two-legged human beings. in and on this planet. Everything else doesn't even really matter. I'm going to go ahead and say it. Everything else doesn't even really matter. It matters because as two-legged human beings with this thing we call the brain that we have egotistically confused ourselves and fallen into an illusion that means that we're higher and better than anything and everything, including our own selves. We've convinced ourselves of that. That's a different story, different topic. So anyway, all I'm saying is, if we wanted to flip the conversation, I believe we have to go back to, we are all human in the room, and we come with our flaws and we come with our uniqueness. And that is what makes us so beautiful in the whole, because the whole is all 8 point blah, blah million of us operating at the same exact times and space, breathing the same exact air, and having all these wonderful multi-layered experiences that somehow fear conjured, that's another story, has created these dividing, invisible lines among us and between us. Thank you.
So beautifully said, and I hope that you're not going to say that that is the last thing you will ever share, because I don't know if it's just me, but every time she kept saying, that's another story, I kept going, oh, I wonder what that story is. Claudia, you have something to chime in with. You may need to turn on your mic.
Okay. When we gather together, when we gather together in a space like this, we are coming from a place where social media and news and other outlets are designed, they reinforce the, I want to call it the 3D consciousness, okay? We come into these circles in a space of fight or flight or freeze by design because of these outside influences on us. And what we can create in these spaces is that space of safety and of love with our energy. When we put our energy of love in the middle of these circles, then that alleviates some of that fight or flight response we come into these circles with many times. I'm not saying all the time, but many times. And so once we can ground ourselves into that oneness that Sandra is talking about, once we can ground ourselves into that space of we are all one, then we can respond. At least I find this for myself. I respond from a place of truth and power. I respond to this in this space from the integrity of my soul.
Mhm.
And that creates, as Sandra said, I think it was Sandra who said, you become the example, but that contributes to the miraculous flow of wisdom into the center of the circle. And so I have to say that, again, I'm going to go back to creating that space. And if you are the creator of the space, then I think it's the responsibility of that creator to create that common space of oneness, so that people can see each other and say, okay, you're from Belgium, but man, you know, you have the same love in your soul that I have. You're from Haiti, but you have the same needs that I have in order to feel worthy as a person.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I have to go back to the centering part of creating space like this.
Mm-hmm.
That is so important. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, I want to, before we chime in, there's something I want to bring in from the chat on YouTube that there, and perhaps we can build on it. One of the comments is, trust is a creation and experience for now, not a condition. There are conditions that cultivate its presence, behaviors that model the possibility for its reciprocity as co-creation. And I think that one of the things that's different about what Sandra said is she used a specific word that modernity wants us to set an example. But in truth, what we're asking people is for a somatic embodiment of the model. You can set an example, but an example, well, I didn't really meet that example really well, and I think that that's oftentimes that we've said, well, if I could only, do as I say, not as I do, right? Well, I think there's a part of it where we have to begin to say in order to create what Claudia and Sandra and all of us are talking about is to embody it through being the model of it, that you don't explain it, that you be it. And I forgot who I cut off. Marianne, did I cut you off? I couldn't remember. I cut off. Who was there somebody else who wanted to say something? Because a person goes on to say on YouTube, yet I can also create it as a condition from which I meet life. Greet my fellow journey persons, right? And so when you are the living embodiment of the best person, or excuse me, the model of who you are, that model is not an example. And I really want to make sure that maybe I'm splitting hairs. Ollie, am I splitting hairs? Can you help me out? Because I think it's an important point.
Yeah.
Well, I would like first to thank all the participants that shared. I would like also to say what a blessing, because this moment, this hour will not come back. This is time that we spend together intentionally speaking about the blessings of gathering. And I will also acknowledge that I want to bless all the gatherings from my past, especially for people that I gathered in the past that are no longer with us. They spread their wings in the other world, and they changed. They inspired me. They changed my journey, and I'm not able anymore to gather with them physically, but I can always gather with them from the mind and from the heart. And last but not least, before I yield the mic, I would like also to acknowledge the fact that before we even gather others, we need also to gather our own inner sides, our own path. Because how could we have a peaceful gathering if we are not at peace with ourselves and ourselves? So that's my share. Thank you.
Love that. Believe it or not, kids, we are getting close to the end of the hour. And I want to do a couple of things here really quick. I want to be able to say, if you are watching us on one of the social media channels and we're going to be talking more about this. And I thought there are so many people in the room that you can't even see on the screen right now, the actual URL. We're going to be ending the online part of this, and we'll probably gather for a little bit afterwards to kind of continue this conversation. You can join us at rsslive.org if you'd like to join in the conversation, even if you've been watching us on YouTube. So was there, as we're getting close to the end of the hour, was there anything that was alive for someone that we want to make sure we contribute to? Oh, come on, someone.
I want to say something about...
Go, Regine.
Go, Regine.
About the idea of trust. And there's 3 ways that I think I heard it mentioned in 3 different contexts. One in reference to the web page that says you should trust me, blah, blah, blah. But to me, I sort of look at this as establishing credibility. Do I have the background to do? I can see you seem credible, but that doesn't necessarily warrant trust upfront for me. And there's also trusting someone else when you enter a space like this, that was a interesting thought to consider, because how can you trust people you don't know? Even though they may be friends of friends, and someone in the beginning said you build. I believe it might have been either Sandra or Jalaki or Claudia. It's something that happens over time. But the third thing to me, which resonates a whole lot more, is trust in life, trust in what the flow of what's happening, and not even trusting in myself, but trusting that I can, moment by moment, make space for it, you know? So, in that sense, I agree with what you shared about the idea of being an example. That's a lot of pressure on ourselves and on others, and not to mention it can become inauthentic. Even the idea of modeling, it got a lot was coming up for me because modeling also feels it's something that I have to present outward, as opposed to giving myself permission to just be more as genuine as I can be in the space. And no matter which way we slice it, no matter how we look at everything we've been discussing, to me, I keep coming back to this idea of being responsible for who we are. And that means accepting where we're at, which can be a challenge and it's a process, but ultimately, you show up in a space, you meet other people. The one starting point to me that makes a lot of sense is coming with the understanding we are human beings with everything that this entails, the beauty, the limitations, the learning process, whatever. But if we begin the interaction starting from that basic understanding, then we can have a conversation. If that's not there, it's going to be difficult for any conversation to happen.
Absolutely. And we strive to do that every week. That is sort of an intent that we set with our gatherings. We have reached the end of our time together, so I'm going to cede the room back to YouTube, and we want to thank all the folks at the Breakthrough Show Network that allow us to come onto their network to put a beacon out there of to be the embodiment of this type of a conversation. So I thank all of you who are assembled, those of you who are watching either now or on the replay this week. If you want to meet us in the sphere to talk about these conversations, we're doing that every day this week. You can literally go to meetinthesphere.com to see the schedule of what's happening. For now, my thanks to all of you. We're going to end the broadcast on YouTube, and we'll see you back here to see what happened after this week of flipping it. So until then, thank you again, and join us next week on Rise and Shine Sundays.